My name is Dustin Wheeler, and my family calls me Duck Tuck. My love of wine created the Duck Vine. The joy and passion I have for wine is a bottle of knowledge I want to share with you. Let me be your favorite certified sommelier and pour you a big glass of edutainment, so you can sit back, swirl it, sniff it, and sip it as we ducks fly together through the wine world. Let's duck and go! All right, all my duck friends. So we've had some great podcasting going through kind of like the basis of winemaking and how we're getting there. It's the end goal. So now we're going to start talking about some other influences that are in the process that can really determine the outcome of the wine itself. This episode is all about the barrel and what does barrels actually do with wine. I believe when most people hear or picture wine, they kind of think of the barrel, whether it being stored in it or shipped in it. It's a huge part of the industry, and barrels are used for more than just wine storage and moving the liquid around. There's regions all over the world that even made it a part of the law with what wood you can use, for how long it needs to be in the oak. All things that lead to an influence on the wine, because it's just so important that they have to take it into consideration. So let's just dive in, find out exactly what the role of the barrel is. Cooperage is a term. It's a very complex subject. It's basically barrel making. It involves advanced techniques. And the term cooperage refers to the craft of making wooden containers and the business itself. A cooper is a skilled individual who constructs barrels. At its core, cooperage relates to the barrels, both their creation and their role in aging wine. And it's a broad topic covering everything from how the barrels are made, how they interact with wine, and even how the trees become barrels themselves. Cooperage is so intricate and detailed that it could easily be its own series. But even with that being said, there's a lot to unpack. I think we'll cover a lot of it in this episode, and really, without getting too microscopic, give you great information and how it influences the flavor of wine. So while I can't cover everything in the episode, I'll touch on the essentials. I do not think barrels get fully appreciated, especially in the complexity that they provide. Most think of them as a container, and maybe it's a storage vessel in most people's eyes, where that's where it stays. I think some people understand that it has some kind of an influence. However, it is very serious business. These barrels are expensive. It's not just serious business into how they influence the wine, but how much they cost. You're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars for barrels, depending on the size, where the wood is from, and other factors that we'll talk about, like toasting. So if you ever get to visit a cooperage, it's a really special treat, but don't be surprised if they don't let you take photos or videos or anything like that. Barrel making is a recipe. It's a secret family recipe, and they don't want their techniques getting out to others. Even though it's conversations that they're having with each other, but it's still their own protected kind of like recipe. Barrels have been used for a very long time, and unfortunately, as we know, wood does break down. So trying to pinpoint when they were exactly the forefront or the origin of them becomes very difficult. However, there is evidence that show barrels have been around since the Iron Age. The Celts used them for transportation. Julius Caesar's encountered them during his campaigns in France around 50 BC. By the 1st century, barrels were even described by Pliny the Elder to his Roman audience, who were unfamiliar with them, because down there they're using clay amphoras. As barrels become more common, their use replaced amphoras for many things. Kind of touch that on in a second. Amphoras were perfumes and oils and all that, and barrels eventually became that as well. There's really no evidence of how wine in a barrel really became a thing, but what people talk a lot in the industries are the stories of trade. At some point, somebody was making a wine, put it into a barrel, and it got put on a ship and made it somewhere else. Barrels were bigger than amphoras and easier to roll around. Amphoras have a little bit of fragility to them, where the barrel was a little more sturdy. So when it was in its original location, it tasted one way. And then when it got to its new home, it tasted different, and a lot of times better. So as this gradual realization came into more and more of the forefront, as monks were involved and people were studying it, they decided this is how we're going to do it. This all started because barrels throughout history were used to store all kinds of goods, and specifically, like I said, excelled during the transportation. The way a barrel looks, which that big bulge in the middle, allows it to be put onto its side, and then it's easy to spin it and roll it and move it around ships when there's not mechanical advantages that we have today. So before the advancement of steel and plastic, you can imagine how important these barrels were. As those things became more prominent, wood barrels are kind of becoming less so. Now, what I mean by that is we're not sailing across the Atlantic Ocean anymore as far as like a wood ship with just sails. We've become much more efficient. So barrels are very evident and prominent in the winery itself, but then once they are done and ready to go, the barrel kind of stays in the winery, and then everything gets put in bottles. Back in the heyday, you would have had the barrel itself moved and then put into an inn or a tavern or something like that, and then all the wine was poured out of the barrel itself. So they could tap a bung into the barrel. That's where you get the word bunghole. And they would serve glasses out of just one barrel. So we are blessed not only by having oak influence in our wines today, but having the choice of a lot of different wines, because back in the 1819, early 1900s, it was just, here's one barrel, you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. Today's wooden barrels are predominantly in the beverage industry with wine and spirits, but they have other uses as well. The barrel making process starts with cutting down the trees, obviously, but they have to be at least 100 years old. These trees are then cut into staves and aged outdoors for 36 months. The staves are eventually shaped, toasted, and then assembled into barrels. And this process is influenced by the kind of oak or the kind of wood combinations. How are they cut? Is it French? Is it American? French and American are probably the most common, but you'll hear Slovenian oak a lot as well. And sometimes even like chestnut and cherry can sneak in there. The toasting of the barrel, almost like your coffee, you get light, medium, heavy, affects the final flavor profile of the wine. Barrel maturation refers to the aging of wine in barrels. So we've talked about maceration during the winemaking process. Here it comes again. But this is just it aging, so more like maturing. This process involves both evolution and extraction. The barrels allow small amounts of oxygen, so even though they're waterproof, they're not airtight. So there is some exchange going on here. It aids in the aging process and allows those oak flavors to come to the wine. Different toasting levels of the barrel impact just how much tannin or vanillin and other compounds may be influenced into the wine. Higher toasting can introduce notes like vanilla in coffee. The interaction between wine and the oak is very scientific as well. So as the wine interacts with oxygen, it can be slow or fast. However the winemaker wants it to happen, the primary fruit notes will start to change. Oxygen also causes small tannin molecules to gather, attract each other. This is called agglomerating. These little tannin molecules agglomerate, and then they get reduced a little bit of the color of the white wine, turning it more gold. In red wine, it'll start to soften the astringency, soften the tannins. Some of the tannins start to absorb the anthocyanins in wine. Anthocyanins are the pigments. They're natural in the grape. So we also get pigmented tannins as well. And once these tannins become pigmented, they're much more permanent in the wine than natural anthocyanins. So by aging it, this is really part of the visual aspect of what we expect in red wines. If we did not do this, if there was no oak interaction at all and you aged a red, the color change is going to be much more drastic than what we would have in something that is barrel aged. This goes into when we start blind tasting. It's an important concept to really try to grasp. As we're studying and going through and really trying to be like blind tasters, rim variation is a way by just visually seeing if your wine is young or old. I think Nebbiolo is a great example. It doesn't turn the typical colors that wine does, but if you've ever seen a young Nebbiolo next to a very old Nebbiolo, even like 30, 40 years, it is crazy the colors that Nebbiolo will turn. We still can have saturated colors thanks to the pigmented tannins, and we need those, like I said, because those natural anthocyanins are disappearing. So as the wine sits in the barrels, things start happening. The exchange that we were talking about, wine and oak, oak and wine. And this is part of where new oak or old oak comes in. Because as this happens, the oak only has so much to give. We're putting new wine in every vintage, but the oak only has so much to give, right? So first, there's an extraction of a compound called lactones. It's derived from a macrobiomolecule called lipids, and these are soluble. Very high levels of lactones in wine, when you smell like a coconut kind of note on a wine, that is what you're smelling. American oak has naturally high levels of lactones, more than what French oak would. So again, going back to the blind tasting aspect, this is important. Now we can start to hone in on where some wines could be from. Because if you're getting coconut and maybe you think it's an old world wine, you're going to go, okay, so this is American oak. I'm going to stay out of France because typically you don't see a whole lot of American oak. You can, but you don't see a whole lot of it in France. They got their own oak anyways. So we're going to go to like Spain, where we know that they use American oak. So no matter the oak, the toasting a barrel and toasting the wood can actually increase the levels of lactones available. Vanilla, another compound, is not related to the vanilla bean. It's a phenolic aldehyde called vanillin. It's found in the vanilla bean, but it's also found in oak. It's a product of lignans. The lignin is the plant. It's the structure of branches, twigs. It's what makes the plant kind of woody or rigid. As lignans break down, the alcohol extracts the vanilla into the wine. Toasting increases this, but also seasoning of the staves can concentrate the vanillin that is in the oak. So a lot of different compounds, a lot of different things going on. The more things break down, more things appear like smoky and spicy stuff. These are volatile phenols. They extract into the wine as the alcohol penetrates the wood. Phenols are harder to coax out. And actually, seasoning staves and air decreases phenols. So you got to kind of like make a choice on which way you want to go with your wine. When a wine has these characteristics, you know it's taken time in the barrel to develop these compounds. It can go into all kinds of unique flavors, even like clove. There's also something called 4-vinyl glycol, which gives you like carnation notes, so floral notes in your wine. It's really incredible just how important the barrel can become to a wine. We talk sometimes in the industry, and I think there's a trend, and I've even been guilty about it, of I don't want an oaky wine because I feel like it influences too much from what I'm trying to grasp from the winemaker or the vineyard site. So I typically stay away from very heavy oaked wines. But when you hear about all these exchanges and these unique things that just happen because Mother Nature is Mother Nature, these are just there, and somehow we got lucky enough, instead of just always having it in clay amphoras and then into bottles, somehow we got lucky enough to build barrels. And you think about these barrels, I mean, it's wood, and somehow we figure out how to put them together so it doesn't leak. Like, it just doesn't. It's the perfect combination of Mother Nature doing Mother Nature things for us to end up with something just really phenomenal. It's just crazy. So I gave you all these crazy names and fanciness, all this stuff, because when you smell wine, this is the complexity you're smelling. Carbohydrates degrade into the wine. They form products as well to add to the aroma. Like for falls, this is a compound that gives you coffee notes, or maybe a bready note. Maltol and cyclotin are two things that give you that caramel note in wine. And then tannin. As lignin breaks down even more, it extracts tannin into the wine. This adds to the wine its structure even more than what the grape would naturally have. So when we look at it, we talked earlier about putting wine in a barrel to age it because of how the visuals will just stay more predominant as it ages. But now we're talking about even adding more tannins to the wine. You have to have tannins for your wine to age. If it doesn't have tannins, it just won't hold up. That's when they start to change the vinegar. So it's just crazy that all this is just what happens just naturally. It really is a beautiful part of winemaking process that, yes, humans have an involvement in it, but really is Mother Nature doing Mother Nature things. Understanding cooperage and barrel aging really can enhance your wine tasting experience. When you taste a wine with oak influence, you're experiencing the result of a carefully managed natural process. This is why some wines have those regulations, like we talked about on aging, and why certain makers are so particular about their barrels. This industry is highly competitive and extremely lucrative for the parties involved. And you talk about the big names, they're signing contracts to lock down cooperages. They don't want those barrels going into their competitors' lineup, right? So it is more important than just being a vessel that wine just sits in. It really does give a whole, not just extra layer, but like 20 extra layers to the process of tasting the wine and the profile and flavors that you get. So I hope this dive into cooperage helps you appreciate the art of barrel making and the impact that it does have on wine. And now next time you taste some oak on a wine or get some of those flavors, you can kind of talk about like, oh, I know where this came from. Oh, it's this compound or that compound. But really excited for everything that's been happening around the duck vine. Please, as always, check out social media. We're going to have actually a bonus episode this week. We did a really cool interview with wine maker called Approachment out of McMinnville, Oregon. So you'll get to hear that interview later this week on our Feature Friday. So enjoy that one as well. And then we'll continue on for the next couple of episodes. A little more like kind of fun influences that are in the wine world, but maybe just kind of like on a side street, like how to age wine, corks and closures, rosé wine, how's it made, what is it about, orange wines, things like that. So hope you guys are enjoying. As always, if you ever need anything, just reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter. My DMs are always open to you guys. So excited to just have you guys be a part of this journey. And until next time, hopefully you learned something. Maybe you had some fun. Most important thing is we got to drink some wine. Bye-bye, guys.